Well, hello, this is Peter Combs from Bidamount.com and P.L. Combs Asian Art, located here in Gloucester, Massachusetts. And today is Friday, December 21st, 2018. Christmas is upon us, and I hope you'll have a great time if you're going away and enjoy your family and friends and eat, drink, and be merry, as they say. We're heading away, and we'll be doing our next video actually from New Hampshire, from our place up there. We're going up with the family. Everybody, so it'll be fun. Anyway, one of the things I wanted to mention before I get into last week's eBay auction results, which were some pretty good things, and the Catawiki sales, which also had some good things, I wanted to bring up something that was resulted from a phone call I got earlier this week. As many of you know, when you're out there looking around on the web, looking at things, you often see vases or porcelains that look like, or other objects too, that look like this, that look like this. These are real ones. These are ones that were sold at Sotheby's and Christie's and so forth that look like this, and they try to pitch them as Republican pieces. All right, these are brand new. Okay, during the Republican period, you have to understand they did not make. During the late Qing, they did, but once you got after about post 1910, 1912. Generally speaking, in China, they were not producing high-quality reproductions of Qinlong or any imperial vases. All right. Once in a while, one of the big auction houses, Bonhams or somebody, will have a minor sale, and they'll put up a vase and say, late Qing Republican period. And I kind of wish they wouldn't do that, because there were very, very few, extremely rare examples of these turning up ever. They did what we typically view as Republican pieces, and those are hard enough to date as it is. But in general, if you see vases that look like these, or really great Kangxi copies, and they're trying to pitch them off as Republican, they're not. They're brand new. Okay, the Republican period has become a catch-all for those of you that aren't aware, for copies. They know they can't they can't sell the thing as an original piece because it isn't good enough, but they do try to peddle them as Republican, and that will trap a few people into buying them, thinking, well, they're at least 100 years old or 90 or so years old, something like that. They're not. They're brand new. Okay, and just as a word of caution, when you see pieces that look like this and they have Qinlong marks or Yongshen marks or Daoguan marks and so forth, they're not. They did do, after the Republican period, post-Republican period, they continued to make examples that were made during the Guangzhou period, for example. They did appear. But examples that were done prior to that are extraordinarily rare. And you can be sure 99.9% of the time they're just brand new copies that they're trying to get over. Okay? All right. Enough said on that. Okay. Now, over here to last week's eBay auction results. There were quite a few good things, and some of them did very well, despite all the hassles in the stock market for the last couple of weeks and fluctuations in currencies and all the wild goings-on in the world with China. The Chinese market from buyers on eBay are still pretty active. Okay, and we're going to get into some of them shortly. One of the pieces that I wanted to mention, not that was a horrible thing, this was up last week. I don't know if you noticed it. It was a brass sundial, Chinese, 19th century. He said it was 18th century. I don't think it was. I think it was probably 19th century brass sundial. But these are pretty rare, and this was a particularly nice one. It was well made, very interesting, and I thought this was quite fabulous, okay, and had a little level in it built into it and so forth. And here it is. It only went for $477, and whoever got this, I think, got a fabulous buy. This is a really interesting object, and with the prices of porcelain and other things getting so crazy at times, things like this turn up, and they are interesting and worth consideration. They're very fascinating objects, and this was a very well-made one, nicely done. Had all its hinges. I think it was missing one nut or a bolt or something somewhere on it, but in general, this was quite complete. Okay, it was just a cool thing. All right, and on to this. This was that little Guy-type 18th century jarlet. Nice one, though. Nice-looking one. Had a double crackle on it, this nice dark crackle, and then this slightly silvery or gold crackle, the minor crackle. They call that a double crackle. Here it is. It's got a wax seal on the bottom. and so forth. This was probably a late 18th, early 19th century pot. Nice looking one. And it ended up doing pretty well. It brought $512. There are some fairly active ghee collectors out there, people that collect cracklewares. I particularly like them. And this was a nice little one. This was a good little one, well potted, and it did fine. Okay. And then onto this was this bronze that popped up, this little bronze pot, nice looking thing, almost like a brush pot. I think it was originally probably an incense burner. It may have had a lid, might not have. But this is a good old one, 18th century or a little before, I suspect. All right. And it did pretty well. It was it brought $934, but this was a nice object. This was from the same seller that had the sundial. Okay, he gets good things. This is Dr. Godfrog, whoever he is. He's over in the UK. He gets things fairly often. He gets good things. All right, and that was a nice piece, and I think it was the $934 was a perfectly reasonable price to pay for it. All right, and then onto this was the Ming bronze, late Ming bronze, lacquered figure on a lotus base with its original stand. This was kind of nice about it. Here, the base, the two-part stand and then with the figure, very nicely done. This wasn't a great one. This wasn't a great Ming example or a late Ming example, but it was a perfectly nice one. And it had these little lotus side cups on it that probably had small figures in them originally, standing in them, I suspect. All right, they don't show a good, there it is, here and here. And I think originally there was a figure that stood in those acolytes flanking the figure, and they probably got knocked off. At any rate, it brought $3,050, okay, which is a very reasonable price for that. A nice little bronze, okay. And then onto this was this carved turquoise stone snuff bottle, 19th century example. Well carved, though. This had nice carving on it. Very fluid, deeply carved, nicely polished, and it was undercarved. You can see, if you look at these stone carvings, the best ones are undercarved. You can see how they carve under the edge, even through a shadow. And this is a good sign of a high quality, one of the things you can look for in high quality carving. And it gives it a very nice, strong, three-dimensional effect because of the shadows that get created. Okay, and this did pretty well. It brought $910, but not an outrageous price for that. Okay, that was a nice little turquoise stone piece, and it had its lid. Often the caps on these are up here, they're badly damaged. They get drop banged, and turquoise is a fairly brittle stone. It chips easily, but this was a nice one. I liked it. Good stone. All right, and then on to this. This was a great buy. If you're a Chinese export lacquer buyer, this was a really good little game set. Sort of an atypical pattern made most often during the late 18th and very early part of the 19th century. But this was a good complete set. And one of the bonus things about it, the lacquer work on this was quite nice, as you can see. It had the grapes and leaf vine pattern running around it, the same pattern you see on late Ming porcelain. It was used often as border decoration. But one of the things that was really interesting was that it was filled with counters. I don't know if everybody noticed that. All right, and these counters generally sell, for anywhere from $10 to even $40, $50, $100 for a great one at times, especially if it has an armorial crest on it. But this was a nice set, including its counters. Okay, and it only went for $710. I think this was a fabulous China trade buy. This was a good buy. All right, if you're a Chinese export collector of early China trade wares. Okay. And then mosey on over to this. I like this little box a lot, and I hope one of our guys that get the newsletter bought this. This was a superb buy. This was theft. This was a great little paktong clad in brass box with a female figure bearing a fan. It was fully inscribed on the back side. Nicely inscribed, and this is good decoration. This piece was done probably during the second half of the 19th century, 1850 to 1875, but very good quality. Nice little metal box, and I love the little strip on the lid of animals and so forth parading across it. And it went for $35. All right, I wished I'd left a bid on it now. I thought this would do quite well. A few months ago, there was a box similar to this on here that went for about $700. But this was a nice box. And somebody got an absolutely great Christmas gift for themselves if they were buying it to keep. That was one of the bargains of the real bargains of the last month. Okay, it was in good shape and good on whoever got it. That was a smart buy. And then there was this pair of light enamel, early 20th century. It was a square vase with inscription and figures. This was a big vase. This was a big vase, and Republic period. This was Republic period, and it has a small chip on the top. It went for $8,300. All right, and it's 18. There it is, 18 inches tall, 6 inches wide. This was a big one. All right, and it shows the strength of authentic Republican period pieces. This was a nice one. All right, and there it is. All right. Now moseying along, this was another good buy. This was a good-looking late 18th century Chinese enamel on Peking enamel or Beijing enamel on copper plate. Here's the back of it. Okay, it's banged around a little bit, but not terrible. And as you can see about how big it was, probably about 5 inches in diameter, 6 inches in diameter. But had a very nice, simple landscape scene with this quite attractive yellow interior rim. And then you have the fellow sort of stretched out in his boat in the background. But this was a nice old piece. And it went also for a very reasonable price, $32, all right? You know, for those of you out there that think that you can't get anything great, you know, still in the Chinese world, you can get some pretty neat things as we're seeing right here on for under $50, which is always encouraging if you're out there and you're shopping on a modest budget. Look at things like this, and as I say, I've said 100 times, leave a bid. You know, I hear from people all the time that say they saw something and they meant to leave a bid on it. They were going to go back. It didn't close for a few days, and then they forgot about it, and lo and behold, the thing slips through the cracks for peanuts. And this was one of those examples. It went through the cracks for peanuts. And this was from Egmont Horn. He had a lot of good things up last week. He's a good dealer, and you can rely on his descriptions pretty much all the time. All right. And then there was this very nice outside decorated plate. This was a nice plate, and it had this nifty square panel in the center. And if you looked at this carefully, it's completely smooth and clear, and it looks almost almost like a napkin resting on the plate with decoration. And then when you look at the area just outside of it, you can see it's all incise decorated. This plate was a really nice plate. Beautifully incise decoration, and then these nice widely spaced floral clusters and so forth. This is a good plate. Here's a picture of the back of it, typically what you want to see on these, okay? Probably Kangxi period, possibly Yongchen. I don't think it was Qinlong. I think it was older than that. And it did pretty well. It brought $628, but it was in very nice condition. And this was a quite unusual and complicated plate to make. All right, when you see those mixes or combinations of decorations, especially with underglaze and then the overglaze area, other underglaze area where there's no decoration, a little bit more complicated. And the enameling on this was quite delicate and very fine. Okay. And then on to this. This was another nice little buy for the week. This was an 18th century famille rose plate figural landscape, and it's got this, the pink outer decoration and figures in the middle. The photographs weren't terribly clear, unfortunately, but it was a family, children and an elderly person, and these two younger chaps coming down the staircase. One of them carrying some sort of a stick or a pole over his shoulder, and the other carrying a hawk. They're probably going falconing, or falcon rather, going falconing, all right? And it only went for $58, okay? That was a pretty good price for that. That was a really good, reasonable price. And one of the things I noticed, though, that it had a little bit of damage here and there, but for some reason, the seller didn't put the dimensions in, all right? And sometimes when you see these, if you notice they didn't put the dimensions in, there's a pretty good chance it's going to go for under the money. Send a note to the seller and say to them, because once it has bids on it, they can't add the dimensions to the descriptions. They can add it as a note at the bottom if anybody bothers checking, but often people don't. Anyway, ask them what the size of the piece is. There was a plate on here years ago that I bought that had no description, and in the photograph it looked like a 5-inch saucer. And I messaged the guy and I said, "What's the diameter of that plate?" And it was a little over 18 inches in diameter. But the way it was shot, it ended up just looking small, and I ended up buying an 18-inch 18th century charger for about $68. All right, and you can sometimes grab yourself a great buy that way. All right, so always get the information if the seller doesn't provide it. Most sellers will give it to you very quickly, and it's worth the effort. All right. Now, speaking of Republican, these were Republican bases. This was a very nice pair of Republican bases. Good detail. This sort of grisaille decorated with iron red and with these relief work bats were quite popular during the Republican period, and you'll see them fairly often. One of the things he didn't include for some reason was a photograph of the bottom of this thing in the main order of pictures. But if you scroll down the page, you have to scroll way down, okay? Because he did provide a lot of photographs. All right, and this is why he didn't probably provide the photographs above. Is it has a fitted base. This may be lead. They sometimes used lead so they wouldn't tip over, and it was drilled. All right, and because of that, you can't see what the mark might be under there. And I suspect it was marked, and somebody out there probably figured out who it was. I'm sure. And the pair went for $2,900. I think these were 34 centimeters, so they were a little over a foot tall each. With drilled bottoms, and I think $2,900 was a very reasonable buy for that. And if you have some books on Republican porcelain, I'm sure you could look it up and find out who the maker was, or who the probable artist was, based on the work. Okay, but a nice pair of bases. And I think that was a very reasonable buy. All right, and then on to this. This was that nice, crisp, beautiful condition Kisi panel that I mentioned last week that was coming up. I liked it because the colors were still so vibrant on this. Good, strong colors. Here's a real good shot of it, and it was obviously folded very carefully and put away for a long time. This is a folding crease, and when you see these old textiles that have these very old, very deep creases in them, those creases will come out. But all it means is that this was carefully put away for a very long time, which is why the colors are still so vibrant. All right, this had apparently a tiny bit of damage right here. But this purple, for example, if this piece had been exposed to any sun, this purple fades very quickly on Chinese silks. It's one of the least stable of all the colors. Yellows tend to fade a little bit as well, and the yellow here was still nice and strong. But it was at one point probably just on a little bit of sunlight, maybe for a year or less, short periods of time, causes the purple, the mordants in the dye to weaken and release the color up a little bit. But this was a nice early textile, and they showed there was a minor imperfection here. It looks like glue or something might have gotten on it. But here it is. This was a big textile. All right, you get an idea how big it is. Here's a door, okay? It's almost the height of a door. And in this photo, it looked like, well, maybe it's, 3 feet by 4 feet. No, this was huge. This was a massive Kisi panel. And it ended up doing pretty well. It sold for $5,600. But for an early Kisi, 18th or early 19th century Kisi in this condition and in that size, this was a perfectly good buy, a nice buy, because the colors were so good on it overall. And if you wanted to send it out, a good restorer could fix up those two tiny patches if you want it done. But I don't think I'd bother. All right. And then on to this. This was nice. There were 2 of these paintings in here of horses. I love paintings of Chinese horses. And these are, I suspect, if you had the script broken down, the kanji broken down, they would just be descriptions of the type of horse or what the horse is doing. But these were nice, old, fairly folk art paintings. I liked them a lot. And the both of them went, there was this one and another one from the same seller. Bamboon 8 had it. And it went for $271, which is perfectly reasonable. And I think they look wonderful framed. All right. Again, this is another area of Chinese art where the prices have not skyrocketed because they did quite a few of them over the years, but they're really wonderful to own, and they look great with a nice mat and a frame. All right. And then on to this. This was the, I think this was Egmont Horn again, had this as sort of Kangxi looking. It wasn't Kangxi, it was probably a 19th century pot. But famille vase with this flattened bottom and recessed glazed area with a Kangxi mark on it. It's not Kangxi, it's 19th century, but nicely done. Very nicely done. He said he thought it might have been later 18th century. He quite possibly could be right on that. He handled it. I didn't, obviously. And it did pretty well. It brought $1,541. But it was nicely potted, and it was about 8 inches tall, which is a good size. And he had a bunch of good things up last week. He had another vase that was good size, but he tends to shoot things very small. He's sort of going for the minimalist photography view here. And I think he's taking the pictures maybe a little too small at this point. So Frankie, if you're watching this, make them a little bigger. All right, because one of his vases that was actually good size went for about $40, and it should have probably brought a few hundred. All right, but this was a very pretty vase. He gets nice things. All right, and then on to this. This was a quite unusual lotus form 18th century plate, Yongchen to early Qianlong period. Quite unusual with the way this is done, with this very nice scrolled irregular sort of. This is a leaf pattern. If you look at it three-dimensionally, it's an upside-down leaf actually, and then it's filled with famille rose flowers and famille rose lingbai here, and another leaf here, and then these lotus vessels going around it. All right, and you see these leaf pattern dishes, but to see one with this pink border, this lotus border, is quite unusual. Here's a picture of the back of it. It had a hairline running through the middle, but this was a rare type of plate, a rare pattern. This is really quite rare, and it brought $236. Somebody spotted it for what it was, and or a few people did, and they chased it up a bit because it did have a crack running through it. But that's quite an unusual plate. In perfect condition, this plate would have sold for probably over $1,000. All right, it's an interesting piece of porcelain. All right, and then on to this was this little Daguan marked iron red and gilt Jadao. Here's a picture of the bottom of it. It had some sort of thing stuck on there, and I couldn't figure out if that was damage or it's a part of a label. Hold on, a condition excellent, no chips or crack. No, it was just something stuck on the bottom. All right, and it ended up going for $1,391. All right, and this is quite a nice one, and the enamel and the gilding on this was, I think, what really helped it. The gilding was in great condition, okay, and it obviously had been used because the interior of it, you could see areas of rubbing and so forth that might have had plants and dirt in it at one point or something. I don't know exactly what, but you can see where there was a fair bit of wear to the enamel, the green interior enamel. Yeah, there it is. That was part of a felt. Oh, it had a felt pad on the bottom. But here's a picture of the bottom. It is appear to be Marken period, not imperial, but very nice, and it went for $1,391. All right, and then on to this was that pair of yellow bowls, beautifully done with the bird on it. It had a little enamel loss right here. Okay. There's some blossoms, and here we are back again with those black birds. The bowl was probably made between 1912 and 1920 or so. And the pair brought $5,100, okay? This is from our friend Kenny down in the Carolinas. He gets, or Virginia, he gets great things. He's a good picker. He hits a lot of unusual shops and house sales and so forth, he and his wife, nice people. And this was a good-looking pair of bowls. I liked them. All right. And then on to the Catawiki stuff. Here it is. All right. And this was another, again, one of these terrific buys that got through over in Catawiki. Was this sort of, it was a later version of what some people often call the Rockefeller pattern, because of or I mean, not the Rockefeller pattern, he was the shipping magnate from Salem, Mass. The Derby pattern, because of the pagoda, okay? And it really wasn't. The Derby, Elias Haskett Derby, the China trade captain, ordered some dishes be brought back from China, and they picked up a nice-looking set that had a pagoda in the middle. It was actually a stock pattern, but since then everybody calls them the Derby pattern for some reason. But anyway, this was a nice one. It was a later 19th century plate with the pagoda, and then the auspicious bats, and then butterflies, and then dragons running around it, and then precious objects in the outer rim. Had quite a lot going on it. It was an interesting plate. And look at this. It went for $39. That was a great buy. That was a terrific buy for a very pretty plate and a rather complicated design for a later plate. And also they had this. This was went for $227, but it was a famille rose plate, mid-1800s, for the Persian market, and in the center of it has a whole area of Arabic script, nicely done. Here's a picture of the back of it. All right, pretty typical for what you see of back then. The export pieces that were made for the Persian market in general in the middle part of the 1800s to the end of the 1800s were not terribly high quality. The quality for those orders had slipped a bit, but they're quite unusual because of the Arabic script. And this just went for $227. All right, that isn't a bad price for that at all. If you like pieces that were custom made for other markets, especially the Persian market, because China had a big relationship with the Persian market for a very, very long time. And then last was this. This was a nifty hat. All right. Chinese winter hat made out of felt and fur, had the original string tassels and the nice glass bead on top. This was a good one. And it went for about the price of the bead, as far as I could tell. It also had this jade stick on here, okay? And it went for $237, all right? That was a very good buy, all right? That was a great buy. He says it might be early 20th century. I don't think it is. The bead looks older than that. And regardless, that was an excellent buy, $237, all right? You can get things on Catawiki right now. At times you can pick up some pretty terrific buys. Again, like you do on eBay, if you have an account with Catawiki, just leave a bid. You know, you might surprise yourself. Get yourself some gifts, all right? And that's it for the week. I'll be away. We'll do a video from New Hampshire. We're going to go up there with everybody in the family, leaving in a couple of days. And you all have a great Christmas, and we'll be back next week. This week on eBay, there are a few things. It's a little quiet because everybody's going away, but check it out anyway. Check out the newsletter this week, and we'll be updating the eBay Today page while we're away. We'll do the update buttons on that. And thanks so much, and thanks for watching. Leave a comment. Subscribe to us here on YouTube if you haven't so far. Come over to Bidamount.com. There'll all be a link down below here. Come over and subscribe to the newsletter and visit the forum. And Merry Christmas. All righty. Bye-bye.